So some of you out there might be wondering, just how do I turn this into this?
One less scum to worry about.
Using nothing but this. Well, first off, it helps that the original TIE Fighter missions are compatible with X-Wing Alliance. Well, for the most part anyway. Not everything works right, some orders get mixed up, some of the balance is broken, but otherwise the mission is ported largely intact. This actually makes it very easy for me to reimagine some missions as I simply expand upon what was built there originally. But there are other missions where I simply decided to start from scratch and build them from the ground up, and this became more common as I progressed through each battle and I wanted to do more complex things. This often involved combining missions together where it made sense, to form a single mission which could then include elements from their combined original counterparts. You see, TIE Fighter's original technical limitations mean larger engagements are often spread across 2 or even 3 missions. The X-Wing Alliance engine and the updates to it from the modding community give us far more options. So I thought it might be fun to let me take you through the various steps and creative processes I go through in reimagining some of these rebuilt missions. For this, we'll take a look at the first 3 missions from Battle 7 of the original TIE Fighter campaign that have now been combined into one single large engagement for the Reimagined campaign. Let's briefly go over what those original missions look like, and don't forget there are story spoilers ahead for the TIE Fighter campaign, so you have been warned. Battle 7, Mission 1. Trap the Protector. The Victory Star Destroyer Protector, the flagship of the late Admiral Harkov, whom you dealt with in Battle 5, has been located and trapped by the Interdictor Harpax. Your main task is to stop the Protector from being resupplied by destroying some cargo containers and skirmishing with its fighters. However, as you complete the mission, a traitor-aligned Nebulon B frigate, the Akaga, shows up along with a light calamari cruiser, the Warhawk, as you head back to the Harpax to prepare for your next assault. Battle 7 Mission 2. Destroy the Akaga. Armed this time with heavy ordnance, your next task is to destroy the frigate Akaga, which is bearing down on the Harpax and the calamari cruiser Warhawk not far behind. Throughout the mission, you're dealing with both Rebel and Imperial fighters harassing you and protecting the Harpax. Eventually though, the Akaga is destroyed and then Lord Vader arrives in the Imperial Star Destroyer Garrett. Battle 7 Mission 3. Retribution. The final part of this battle. With Vader on the field with reinforcements, it's now time to destroy both the Protector and the Warhawk, eliminating what few fighters they have left and continuing to protect the Harpax, which is getting too close to the enemy starships now. But just as the tide turns in your favour, Admiral Zarin arrives with reinforcements, only for those reinforcements to turn on you and attack Vader's Star Destroyer as well as destroying the Harpax. However, you manage to eliminate the Protector and defeat Zarin's forces. Now, that's a lot to do for one mission, and I had to think carefully about how I wanted this to proceed as a single mission and figure out how to script it along the way. There's so much more to mission making than just putting down a bunch of ships and giving them orders to shoot each other. There are multiple factors to take into account. Critically, it's important that the mission is fun, engaging, and balanced for the player, that they have a clear direction on what they need to do, and that it isn't frustratingly or obnoxiously difficult to complete. The last thing I want is for this to be just a slugfest that leaves the player bored, uninterested, or annoyed. Then there's the story elements from earlier in the main campaign, such as the extra ships I've added to Harkov's fleet, and subsequent engagements to maintain a consistent narrative to make it feel like the player understands what's going on and recognises the ships that they're up against. Finally, there's a directorial element here as well. How I want the mission to look and the emotions it might evoke from the player as the fight progresses. We'll go over this a bit more later, but let's start at the beginning. So, we start with a blank slate, which starts with one ship, the player, and if we were to load this up now, you'd see nothing but black because there's no light source and maybe a handful of stars in the background. So we need at least a light source and a nicer starfield background, so we'll just quickly add those in. But I do want to make sure that we have a nice epic backdrop to this battle. In this case, I went with a low orbit scenario over a gas giant to make it visually distinctive and memorable, and so we can have some cool dark red lighting which will help accentuate the battle as it progresses. But this is just window dressing. The main thing I have to figure out is how to make this work. I know that I want this to be a large-scale epic battle, and that this will push the limits of the engine, but before I worry too much about that, I just need to set the basic scene. First off, I just put down the main assets that I want to use in this mission in their rough starting positions. At the moment, this is generally just capital ships and support ships. I've got the layout in my head. We've got the main enemy fleet up here, our command ship and the interdictor in the middle, and then Vader's and Zaren's forces at the bottom. Great, I've got the assets down, but now what? How do we go about combining the elements of those 3 original missions now into a large, coherent, and fun space battle? Well, to make this work, I decided that we needed 4 distinct stages to how the battle will progress. Stage 1. Harkov's fleet has been trapped by the interdictor Harpax, with the modified frigate Osprey supporting you. You don't have enough firepower to destroy his fleet outright, but we know they're down to minimal fighter support. So, our initial attack will be to simply mop up what's left of their fighter fleet using a full squadron of TIE Advanced. So as we launch, there's a good minute or so before the initial clash, and it gives the player time to appreciate the low orbit backdrop, seeing a full squadron of wingmen beside you, and seeing the threat looming in the distance as the Protector and its escorts come about to face you. The opening stage of this mission should be pretty easy and feel like the player has the superior position, like you've already won really. At least until a full-size calamari cruiser shows up with an assault frigate and a couple of corvettes. With this new threat showing up, it's time to pull back to the Harpax and the Osprey and prepare your defense. Stage 2. Now it's time to put the player in a very difficult position. With the arrival of the rebels, the tide has suddenly turned against you, and your 2 medium-sized capital ships are now facing off against 7 enemy capital ships, 2 of which outgun you easily just on their own. Sure, with the interdictor you can stop them from running away, but you simply aren't going to win this fight without backup. Yet, you have your orders, so now it's down to a desperate holding action. I want the player to feel the pressure, their backs to the wall, having to use all their skill and strategies learned up to this point to defend the Harpax. I want this to be a huge spectacle of a fight, and I want an initial clash of ships similar to what we see in Return of the Jedi when the rebels face off against that initial wave of Imperial fighters. Visually, this also means seeing the threat bearing down against you every time you swing your ship about. The enemy fleet is on a higher plane than your own ships, implying the dominance of their tactical position, and as the fight goes on, that fleet gets closer and closer, increasing the pressure. But we also need to give the player a breather before this fight to rearm by docking with the Osprey and giving them a couple of minutes to bring their shields up to full if necessary, and basically take stock of the situation and see how they want to do this. This all requires some creative waypoints and triggers to ensure that the rebel fighters attack en masse at a designated point, and to give time for the player and your friendlies to prepare the defense. When the rebel fighters reach a certain point, your own allies will race forward to meet them, and the battle begins proper. By the end of this stage, you will most likely have lost the modified frigate Osprey, and the Harpax will be taking severe damage, and most of your friendly fighters are gone. Basically, all seems lost, until Stage 3. Huzzah! Vader finally arrives with 3 Star Destroyers. The tables have now turned, you are in the superior position, all 3 destroyers launching waves of fighters and bombers, and it's once again turned back into an easy game, giving the player a reprieve and making them feel elation as they can now go to town on the enemy fleet and wipe them out, or just simply sit back and watch the spectacle. You've earned this breather after such a hard fight. Again, visually, we have our destroyers now on a higher plane to the enemy fleet, showing how that dominant position has now reversed in our favour, and that they are now in the position we were just in. At this point, you should feel victory, and prepare to wind things down until Stage 4. Admiral Zaren's forces have arrived, seemingly to help, but then after a minute start firing on your own forces. They quickly overwhelm and destroy the 2 flanking destroyers, leaving Vader's destroyer in a pincer movement between 2 groups of forces. and we once again put the player into a tight spot as they have another desperate fight to defend Vader and eliminate this attacking force. This will then be the second time of showing the TIE Defender in action as they launch from Vader's ship to assist you. By the end, the Devastator has taken some damage but survives and will narratively lead neatly into the next mission where you have to race to Coruscant. But you will have still won and possibly be slightly exhausted by the end of it. And thus, we have a fully working mission structure that incorporates all the elements of the 3 original missions this is based upon. The key at this point is to balance the timings of when various ships arrive and to balance it just right for the player, which means a hell of a lot of testing. This mission is the longest in the entire Reimagined campaign and will easily clock in at around the 20-minute mark, but hopefully will also be one of the most memorable and fun. I hope you've enjoyed me taking you on this little creative journey, and let me know in the comments section if you have any questions or other things you'd like to see in future videos. Otherwise, be sure to check out our other videos, and until next time, take care.